Hey there, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Several Democrats in the House have introduced the Community Broadband Act, which would prevent states from prohibiting municipal broadband networks, electric cooperatives, public-private partnerships from offering broadband. Be right back and we'll take a look at that legislation. Hey, Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. Thanks for joining me. So I'm going to do something similar to what I did yesterday. Yesterday I was looking at a act that was introduced and will probably, probably won't pass, but I don't know. The text came out yesterday and I compared the text, and this is legislation that was introduced, and it would possibly delay the broadband mapping. It would not allow the NTIA to make any disbursements of funds until the broadband maps were in better shape, although it looked like from the text that they would still be able to decide how much each state would get, but then they wouldn't be able to actually disperse any money until not this current map that's going to be coming up in, let's say, not the current map, excuse me, the next map that's coming up in May or so, this spring, May, June. But they'd have to wait till the one that comes out like November, December. So I don't know if that one's going to have a chance to pass. It looks like it might have a better chance based on the text, but I still don't think that's necessarily going to get the senators behind it that need it. So this is something that was introduced in the House very recently, and this would prevent, it's called the Community Broadband Act of 2023, because this is something that's been proposed several times. In fact, I think the last time might have been 2007, and I think even prior to that, where they would like to have a prohibition where states cannot, or I should say, something that would prevent states from prohibiting municipal broadband networks and others, from getting into the broadband business. So in 2007, I think it was a bipartisan bill. I think it had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. This time around, I think it's all Democrats. And the House, and that was in the Senate. This time the House is controlled by Republicans, so it's unlikely to go anywhere, but I wanted to take a look at it. And like yesterday, I took the time to go through this bill. It's not very long, but then also try to figure out what it's changing. And this would be changing the Telecommunications Act of 1996, that huge, long act that passed back then. And back then when it first passed, it was all about telephone services, and then later it was updated, I think, to add broadband as well. So I was going to take a look at that. So this is the bill that was introduced. You see here, it's Community Broadband Act of 2023 is a short title. And then, like yesterday, I was going to look at everything that changes. So it talks about what the changes that they'd be amending in the Telecommunications Act, and I wanted to walk through that. So I went to the Telecom Act. I pulled up the text, and I was surprised to find that, like if you look in here, you've got one of the first changes is it says it's going to be changing D. And there is no, or excuse me, it's going to be redesignating, subsection D and making it C. Anyway, there's no D in here. So basically you've got A, B, and C, and there's no D. So it was changed later. It was amended later to add the D, but for some reason it's not on the text that I found. So I found something on, here's Cornell Law site that I'm going to be looking at that's got the current text. So, and I'm going to show what the changes are on this. So I'm just going to close out this thing because I couldn't find it in there. Didn't make any sense. So again, the first change you see here is redesignating subsection D as subsection E and inserting after subsection C the following. So basically, if we look at that, so we've got here, if we look down here, we've got, this is A, B, and C, and then you've got subsection C, and then there's D here, excuse me, definitions would be D, and they're going to change that. So they're going to make D, E, and then D is going to be all of this stuff, okay? So you see here, then got that. So then they've got some changes, 1, 2, and then A that they're adding, and B. So let's look at that. So here's what they're adding in. So D would become state, local, public-private partnerships, and co-op advanced telecommunications capability and services. So in general, no state statute, regulation, or other state legal requirement may prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting any public provider, public-private partnership provider or a cooperatively organized provider from providing to any person or any public or private entity advanced telecommunications capability or any service that utilizes the advanced telecommunications capability provided by such provider. So an advanced advanced telecommunications capability or services in this case is talking about broadband. So this bill was amended later on to make broadband basically not just telephone service. You see here anti-discrimination safeguards, public providers to the extent any public provider regulates competing private providers of advanced telecommunications capability or services that utilize advanced telecommunications capability or broadband. Such public provider shall apply its ordinances and rules without discrimination in favor of itself or any provider that it owns of services that utilize broadband. Just shorten that. So it's saying that they can't discriminate. So they can provide the service, but they can't discriminate. Public-private partnership providers, to the extent any state or local entity that is part of a public-private partnership provider regulates competing private providers of advanced telecom capability or broadband service that utilize that, such state or local entity shall apply its ordinances and rules without discrimination, very similar, without discrimination in favor of such public-private partnership provider or any provider that such state or local entity or public provider partnership provider owns or services that utilize broadband. So again, they don't want to discriminate if it's a public provider or if it's a public-private partnership. They want to make sure they're trying to keep it a level playing field. Now, a lot of folks would say it's not really a level playing field because you've got a public entity or maybe an entity that is a co-op that's a not-for-profit, right? So they don't have this this need to make a profit. And profit's not an evil thing. Sometimes people say, oh, profits, it's evil. But no, I mean, if you're going to have a private business, and most of the country is private businesses, most of the things that you buy, the places you go, your iPhone, and all this other stuff that people have, I mean, it's a for-profit business. That's why we have the wonderful diversity of things that we have. The government doesn't make everything. And if the government made everything, then this would be a communist country, and we know how that works. So it doesn't work, right? Private companies are great. The private industry and competition, capitalism, all of that stuff works to give us, again, this vast diversity of services and products that we have. And, generally it can keep prices down because of competition. Now, sometimes in certain situations, like maybe broadband, in certain areas, there's not competition. So there's always those kinds of things. And in some cases, we've seen with broadband that you may have an area that it's hard to make a profit. It's hard to make a return on investment. And that's one of the reasons that we have areas that are unserved or underserved. So, there are those kinds of things that we're trying to address. But in general, profits are not bad. But it does leave the private company at a disadvantage if they have to, in addition to having the cost that it takes to provide the service, then have a profit on top of that. Whereas a public entity and maybe a co-op, a membership, a member-owned utility, something like that, doesn't necessarily have that profit that it has to do. That's a little bit of a disadvantage. But they are building into here the fact that they cannot discriminate in any way. If a city does this or a co-op does this or public-private partnership, they can't discriminate. Then there's a savings clause here. Nothing in this subsection shall exempt a public provider, public-private partnership provider, or cooperatively organized provider from any federal or state telecommunications law or regulation that applies to all providers of advanced telecom services. So in other words, they're not exempt from any laws that would apply to private companies as far as broadband. They have to be under those laws as well. So again, trying to have as level of a playing field as possible. So that whole section gets inserted here as a new D. So what was D becomes E, and that section that I was just looking at becomes the new D. So then we've got E, which doesn't really change other than they change this word subsection to section. So if we look back at here, right here again, we're saying subsection is redesignated. So now we're at 2E. Is that where we are? Let's see here. Yeah, here's 2E. And again, it's saying this subsection and inserting this section instead. And then it's redesignating paragraph 2 to 3, and then inserting something there at that point. So here's that change. And then we're putting in 2. What was 2 is becoming 3, and then we're putting in a new 2, and this is the new 2. Cooperatively organized provider. The term cooperatively organized provider means any or an entity that is treated as a cooperative under federal tax law and that provides advanced telecommunications capability or any service that utilizes such advanced telecom capability to any person or public or private entity. So we're in the definitions section here. So they're just adding some definitions, which is why they're doing this. So again, this is the new 2 right here. And then you've got, in addition to that, then you've got 3 stays the same, elementary and secondary schools. And then they add 4, 5, and 6 after that. So I put those down here. So again, just looking at the bill, you see we've got 2, and then we've got 4, 5, and 6 that they're adding. And that's basically it. So all of this text right here is what I've copied into this section here. So 4 is public provider. The term public provider means a state or local entity that provides advanced telecom services, let's say broadband, et cetera. And then we've got public-private partnerships. It defines that. The term public-private partnership provider means a public-private partnership between a state or local entity and a private entity that provides advanced telecom capability, et cetera. And then state or local entity, obviously the term state or local entity means a state or political subdivision thereof. Any agency, authority, or instrumentality of a state or political subdivision thereof, or an Indian tribe, as defined in Section 4E of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. So that's it. So this, again, is the section of the 1996 Telecom Act that would be changed. So it seems reasonable to me. However, again, with this being a Republican-controlled Congress, and this is, I don't see any Republicans signed up on this bill, whereas, again, before when this was introduced in 2007 in the Senate, something very similar, it was bipartisan 2 and 2. In this case, it's a handful or more, a few more of Democrats that have submitted this. So I don't see it going anywhere. But to me, it seems reasonable. And there's always that question of states' rights because, you've got the federal government and you've got the states. And anything that really the states are supposed to have access to or be able to determine anything that's not in the Constitution, they're supposed to have control over that. Now, of course, when you have bills like this, you've got the legislative process, and they're already controlling some of the things with the states, as we were seeing from some of this other text that's already in the Telecom Act. There's always that question as to whether states should be able to determine this. So that's always an open thing. But, the other thing that you have to consider is there's other ways to skin this cat, so to speak, and which is what I think they're doing or trying to do with the BEAD program. Because in the BEAD program and the notice of funding opportunity for that, it specifically says that states cannot discriminate. They must allow entities such as municipalities, towns, cities, whatever, and then co-ops, public-private partnerships. They cannot not allow, double negative, they cannot not allow those entities to provide broadband. So any state that wants to get funds for BEAD has to allow those kinds of entities to be able to bid on that, and they cannot discriminate against those. So I think a lot of states, I think there's 20 or so now that have some kinds of provisions in there that are either prevent this or that make it more difficult. Like Colorado, for example, you have to, a city can do it, but they've got to get a vote from everybody in order to do that. If there's a provider already there, because one of the things that Republicans are trying to do is protect the private enterprise or the private businesses that are already there providing service. So some states will say that if there's already a private operator there, then the city can't get in the business. But then you've got the issue of what if it's not good service? Now, most likely, if it's a city, a town, and there's a provider there, they have generally enough customers to be able to make the service reasonably affordable. And also, well, I shouldn't say not affordable, but they can get a return on their investment because there's enough customers generally there. So it's where we tend to have more problems are in rural areas outside the towns and outside the cities. But that's when you've got electric co-ops that are perfect for providing broadband because they tend to cover those vast swaths. Those people are already their customers. They have access to infrastructure. So, again, there's not many laws, I think, that would prohibit EMCs or rural electric co-ops from getting in the business, but it does tend to be, like municipalities and those kinds that are prohibited. So BEAD will maybe take care of some of that, but I think a law like this, I don't really think that this is unreasonable, and it does seem to build in some protections. But again, there's just that question of, if the city gets in the business, can a private company compete with them? Because again, they have to have a profit and the city doesn't. So that's always a concern for folks. So anyway, wanted to walk through that again and just show you where that is in the bill. It's kind of difficult as you go through these bills and try to figure out where everything is as far as letters and numbers. It was a little bit easier here because the sections weren't quite as long as what I was looking at yesterday. But anyway, thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when I'm live. If there's anything we can help you with as far as a broadband operator, if you provide broadband services, let us know. You see our contact information there, our phone number, email address. We provide lots of services for broadband operators, helping them to be more efficient in their service, more profitable. So check us out if you're a broadband company. I'm sure we can help you. Thanks a lot for joining me. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.